Struggling to pay your child support? Are not receiving any? Need a modification? Has the Department of Revenue filed a case against you? Don't face this alone. If you are dealing with a child support problem, a knowledgeable family law attorney may be able to help you solve it. Let us help so you can focus on being the best parent you can be. Stress less, choose more. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Conti Smith, and I am a family law attorney in the Central Florida area.
And I am Frank Symphorien, board certified immigration expert and also founder of Symphorien-Saavedra Law and good friend of Conti Moore, the Conti Moore.
Well, thank you, Frank, for agreeing to join us again today. Every month you've been joining us since this beginning of this year, and my clients have benefited tremendously from your expertise and your advice. And so over the past couple of months, we have prepared some questions that our clients have had that I would like to have you answer. How does that sound?
I appreciate the opportunity, Conti. It's really, I very much welcome it, and it's always a privilege to be here with one of Orlando's premier family law attorney, to get this added exposure from you. So happy to be here.
Well, thank you, Frank. Thank you. So let's get started. We're getting a lot of calls that are coming in. So the first question is, my spouse is a U.S. citizen and uses my immigration status to control me. Can that count as abuse under VAWA?
Absolutely. Control is one of the premier or the primary means by which somebody who is abusive, psychologically abusive, can control the person, and that's one of the primary means by which we show that the person qualifies under the VAWA statute. There's a power wheel and control that U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services use, and also very common in social sciences, where somebody kind of separates the spouse or the victim from, kind of ostracizes them from their community, from their friends, isolates them from their community, their friends, their family, as a way, because the more isolated you are, the easier it is for the person to control you and to and to victimize you, right? So that is absolutely
that in a lot of domestic violence cases, just across the board, right?
Correct. Right. Yeah, and absolutely, that is one of the principal ways that the person that we can show abuse. That control just kind of furthers their efforts to psychologically hurt someone.
Right. Okay. The next question that we get a lot is, can I still get legal status if I divorce my abusive U.S. citizen spouse before my green card is approved?
So that one, the answer is it depends. It depends if you are actually the victim of extreme mental cruelty, or if you're a battered spouse under the battered spouse statute. The battered spouse statute requires that we show that the person has victimized you, and you're the victim of extreme mental or physical abuse, extreme cruelty, actually. And so, if you can show that, if there are some elements of abuse in the marriage, then yes, you can still get legal status before if you divorce before the green card is approved.
Okay. The next question is, what if my spouse never filed my immigration papers like he promised? Do I have any options under VAWA?
Yes. So the VAWA allows you to do what's called a self-petition. And essentially, as long as you did marry a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, then you can self-petition, you can file your own petition asking for immigration status based on your spouse's abuse. Again, we do have to prove abuse, physical or psychological abuse. But once we establish that, then yes, you can self-petition without your spouse.
Okay. I'm undocumented and afraid to go to court for a restraining order. Can I still file?
From an immigration standpoint, absolutely. But I think this is more of your question, right, Conti? So I'll ask you the question: can they
Yes,
file?
yes, you can. You can still file. You can still go if you're and it's not really it's a temporary protection order, or you can still file and try to seek relief if you feel that you need some sort of protection. But like I tell everyone, no matter your circumstances or your immigration status, if you get an order from the court, it is just a piece of paper. It is not going to protect you from a bullet. It's not going. You have to still be aware and take precautions and make sure that you are aware of your surroundings. But a restraining order is just a piece of paper. That's really it. That's just the person can't come around you. We've seen instances where people violate the court orders and they still try to hurt that person. So you still need to take precautions and make sure that you are aware of your surroundings and that you're safe. Because a restraining order, an order from the court, ultimately may not protect you from physical violence if someone wants to try to harm you. So yeah. I just put that out there for everyone.
Yeah, there's possibly there, Conti, sorry to interrupt. There's possibly another component or aspect of this question. The person may also be asking if they should be afraid to go to court from an immigration aspect, right? Unfortunately, we've seen the raids, we see what's going on. If you're undocumented and you do not have anything pending with immigration authorities, my understanding is unfortunately, the government right now keeps, reporting and asking for tips, asking for immigration on immigrants. It used to be that they did not have the capacity to investigate every tip that they got. Unfortunately, under this big ugly bill that Trump signed in the summer, there is a lot of resources for additional law enforcement, immigration enforcement officers, and we do expect that those resources are going to result in increased investigations for people that report on illegal immigrants or undocumented immigrants. And so, it is something to be cautious about. I don't know, Conti, you can tell us more about. Are you seeing people being picked up? I get they do have to go to court if they file the injunction, right?
Yeah. So if you go for an injunction, like unlike other family law cases, it may take, in a regular divorce case, months before you ever go to court, right? The mediation may be held virtually, so you're not really in court immediately for a divorce. For an injunction, however, if a temporary injunction is an order is issued, then you usually have to come to court within 2 weeks, right? We're not seeing, at least in Orange and Osceola counties, where people are going for an injunction hearing and they're getting picked up by ICE. Like, we're not seeing that. I'm not saying it's not possible at this point. Anything is possible, but also unless the other side brings it up, no one's really asking about your immigration status. Now, if the other person is trying to hurt you or is out to defend themselves, they might bring that up at the hearing, and that's possible, and you can't control what they say. But people aren't, they're not asking, are you undocumented? Are you documented? Or what's your status if you're trying to seek some help?
I guess I would say I guess I would say one of the precautions that you mentioned just a second ago that you might want to take is to speak to an immigration attorney. Consider filing, if you're a victim of abuse and your spouse is a permanent resident or a citizen, consider filing a VAWA before you file the restraining order, or at the same time, right? So that you have some sort of protection under the Violence Against Women's Act, or potentially if you're the victim of abuse and you've called the police, which I think we're going to talk about that in a minute. It's one of the questions. Then potentially file a U visa and request protection as the victim and a cooperating witness to any crimes. So, you want to sort of have some options, immigration you want to know what your immigration defenses might be if you do get picked up, or sort of have that in play, or at least go into court with a clear mind that, hey, if I get detained, I don't have defenses, it's a small chance, but at least be prepared and make arrangements for that possibility. In reality, I think any immigrant in this environment should have already consulted with an attorney and have arrangements. We've talked before about making sure that you have plans for your children, custody documents for your children with Conti. I know you can prepare those for them. So I encourage everybody to make sure that you have arrangements already in place in any situation like this.
Absolutely. So the next question, if I call the police or file a case, will immigration be notified?
Well, so this used to be the case that I could comfortably say no. If you're the victim, usually, law enforcement took significant protections and was very cautious to make sure that victims felt protected and comfortable in testifying and calling the police. There's actually a whole immigration statute that was created for this to encourage immigrants to testify, where you can get immigration benefits if you're the victim of significant usually physical abuse, or if you're a witness to a serious crime, violent crime usually, or physical crime. Unfortunately though, unfortunately we are seeing these days that certain law enforcement officers are more, willing to detain even victims. I did hear a report of a friend of mine a couple of days ago just told me about a victim that called the police for his daughter, who was the victim of sexual abuse. And when they came and to provide help for the daughter, unfortunately, the child, the father was arrested by immigration authorities. This was in Lakeland. So I think it's more likely in these, very heavy anti-immigrant counties, right? You see some sheriffs that are very aggressive. This was in Lakeland County. My friend and I considered going to the news media, et cetera, because obviously it's outrageous that the father of a victim who's, doing his duty, right? Civic duty, reporting the criminal, right? So do we want these criminals running around, lurking in our communities, attacking immigrants and non-immigrants alike? Because I don't think they distinguish by that, because the immigrant is afraid that the police cannot protect them or will deport their parents, right? That doesn't seem like a very good public, safety message. But some counties are more considerate of that. They're more open to those messages, and some are not. This was in Lakeland, so it's Polk County, right?
Polk County.
There's a sheriff who likes to, there's certain sheriffs who like to show how strong they are against immigrants, and I would be more careful if I was in those counties.
Absolutely. And I will say this, that I do a lot of the consultation calls, and so when you're consulting with people, you're hearing people say, "Well, they're not here legally," that's the what they are just going to the mat on, like they're not in there. So you're hearing a lot more of that, like they're not here. Well, okay, I mean, a month ago you loved them, but now right. Immigration status is what matters. And for us, it's a red flag when you hear those things, like, oh, okay, well, you might need to go find someone else. But it's you know the person that you're dealing with better than I or myself or we don't know them. So if they're going to use that against you, you need to consider that. But if you really are fearful for your safety, it would be my hope that you could contact the police and get help.
Yeah, my best advice is, be mindful of where you live and the county and the environment and what those sheriff's priorities are and what that sheriff is telling the local law enforcement. I think, most major cities, you'd be fine. I think if you called Orange County, I would say you're probably okay. But if you're in Lake County or, Polk County, I would be extra careful on calling the police. Maybe call the city police as opposed to the sheriff, because I think usually city police, depending on your city police department, right? I would be a little bit cautious about that.
Okay. Can I apply for a U visa if I report domestic violence to the police?
Yes. A U visa is one of those visas that I mentioned before that allows a cooperating victim of physical violence to request immigration status here in the United States. Unfortunately, it is one of those visas that takes a very long time. It takes about 5 to 7 years, Conti. It's ridiculous. Wow. So Congress created a cap on the number of these visas that can be approved on an annual basis. And so basically there's been a lot of people that have applied and the limit has been reached. And so that's created a significant backlog since then.
So can they remain in the U.S. while they're waiting or no?
That's the problem. That legally speaking, no. Strictly legally speaking, it doesn't give them immigration status when they file it. It only gives them immigration status once it's approved in the 5 to 7 years down the line. So that's the challenge that we're having. And we are seeing immigration, we used to have this used to be a significant, it has two parts to it. What has to happen is first, the law enforcement officer that is investigating the crime has to certify that the person is cooperating. So you do want to make sure that you cooperate with law enforcement so that they can, you can have a good chance of them doing so and saying it. I will say this, some counties are not very good about this. As you can imagine, Polk County Sheriff's Office is not the best about signing these certificates that the person is cooperating, because they understand and know that this might lead to the person getting some immigration benefits, and they don't want that. Orange County is great about this. In general, they are very attuned to the message of public safety, right, that this presents, that encourages immigrants to report abusers, physical, violent people that are abusing, women or men. And so they do certify that. So you have to have the certificate certified by law enforcement. Then once they certify your cooperation, you file it with immigration authorities. But immigration authority, and used to be that if you got law enforcement to certify this was sufficient grounds usually for a court to just kind of leave you alone, or for immigration to leave you alone, since you have a certificate from law enforcement that you are a cooperating witness, right? I mean, you're essential to a public service or public safety proceeding, right, in state court. That used to be enough. Unfortunately, these days, the federal government, immigration agents, and immigration courts are not very mindful of this, and a lot of people are being removed even while they have these certificates, these applications pending with U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. So I still encourage people to do it and file it and report, obviously carefully. I do think you have to be careful depending on which county you live in if you're calling the police. But if you live in a good county that understands that immigrants contribute to their communities, then call the police and cooperate, and file your VU visa once you get that certification, because obviously, there's a lot of immigrants that will be able to wait the 5 to 7 years. One big thing that it does is that once you get that U visa filed, it provides for a driver's license. So you can, with the certificate that you get from immigration authorities in Florida, at least for now, you can get a driver's license.
Got it. Okay. My abuser threatened to have me deported if I told anyone. How can I protect myself?
Well, so I think there's two components to that, right? I think from the immigration standpoint, if your abuser is a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident, right, and you are married, you can file a VAWA case against them. Not against them, but with immigration authorities. You can file a self-petition under the Violence Against Women's Act, and that can result in permanent residency status. If you report them to the police, you could potentially do a U visa, as we just discussed, which allows victims of physical, domestic violence or physical harm to get a U visa who cooperate with law enforcement. So that's a second benefit you can have. Obviously, from your perspective, Conti, what can they do from a family law perspective? Is there anything they can do to
you can file for an injunction. You need to document it. What it comes down to is documentation. You just can't say that someone, you can. And there's ways that people can abuse you. You can't see it, but you need to kind of document, what's going on, so that if you have a hearing, you can show or have a video or something of what's happening. In DV cases, domestic violence cases, when there's a lot of he said, she said stuff, it's hard for the judge to figure out who's telling the truth. And so a lot of people, it's not always if you call the police. Like, whether you call the police doesn't really say if you were abused or not. A lot of people are afraid to call, but it's just making sure that you document what's happening. Maybe even like texting like, hey, I didn't appreciate you putting your hands on me, or doing that in front of the kids, like creating that, because that comes in. Your text messages with that person comes in a hearing about like what you said or what they said. Like, those communications can come in. So you just kind of need to create a paper trail of what's going on.
So you can seek a domestic violence injunction or some sort of protection from the court system if there's abuse, right? I think
absolutely you can, but
you have that documentation, right?
Yeah, it comes down to what you can prove.
Okay.
And so and some people, there's people can abuse you in different ways, and sometimes it's not always something where you can have the paper trail. and you can show it, unfortunately. And so, but you need to contact us so that we can help you assess, what's going on. Because there's also like financial abuse, other ways that people can abuse you, that you have protection from if you have the evidence, and that we can show it and get to court and try to get you some help.
Perfect. Wonderful.
Okay. Can I still qualify for VAWA if the abuse was emotional or financial, not just physical? Great question.
Yes. So the answer is absolutely. Physical, emotional and financial abuse counts, absolutely counts. The statute allows every aspect of abuse. It's mental or physical cruelty. So if we have, and we've had multiple cases, probably numerous cases that we filed where the abuse was strictly emotional or financial. Without any physical component. I think the key though is that you have to have documentation, just like you mentioned, right, Conti? You have to have, you have to seek treatment. You have to document that control the verbal abuse, right? You have to try to have the text messages, have audio record. Well, audio recordings in Florida are a little tricky, right? Because they're not necessarily authorized. For immigration purposes, it can work. I mean, we can submit they're not subject to Florida law, but obviously you could potentially get in trouble in Florida if you're recording people without their authorization. I don't know if you can, warn them, hey, I'm going to record you. You keep, I don't know, would that work?
But also, like, there's like if there's surveillance camera footage in the house and they've known that it's there, well, then they consented to that. You know what I'm saying? So there's different. You need to really consult with an attorney when it gets to like this degree of trying to figure out what to do, so that we can properly advise you on whether or not that information is admissible, because it could be admissible. It could or could not be admissible for court, but then it may be admissible, or you can use it for the immigration part. So you need to speak with, that's why we do these or have these conversations, because you can tell it from your perspective. I can tell it from mine. And it's important that you have a family law attorney and an immigration attorney that can help kind of guide you through some of these issues.
Absolutely. And I guess I would say, if the person is extorting you for money and is, controlling you. And so, I mean, that is a crime in some ways, in many ways. And so if you have documentation, text messages, whatever you can find, witness testimony, all of that physical, financial or emotional abuse, it does count for under the Violence Against Women's Act.
Got it. What evidence do I need to apply for VAWA or a U visa?
So this is, one of the things we've been talking about, right? You need proof of physical or mental cruelty. It could be psychological, it could be financial, it could be control, it could be verbal abuse, it can be threats, it can be isolation from family members, from, whether it's text messages, videos, if there's, video recordings. I mean, these days text messages are the absolute best evidence we have, that most people have, right? I mean, because if you have somebody who's violent or abusive, they probably can't control themselves from being abusive in a text message and so forth. And so you have a way to document that. And Conti brought up a great point. Like, even if there's no video, you can say, send a text message. If the person doesn't contest it or challenge what you said in the text message, you can say what they did. I'm hurt from what you did to me yesterday. I'm still bruised and my face hurts, and I've been icing it all night, and you can't do that to me again or something, right? Like if the person doesn't dispute it, then that's probably pretty good evidence that there's abuse, and that the person did beat you and cause bruising. We always have witness testimonies as well. We have letters, affidavits from people who see the abuse. Make sure you take pictures of the bruises or whatever they do. It's absolutely critical that you get pictures, text messages, videos.
Anything besides you just trying to say it happened.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah. And it is important to note that for VAWA, the standard is legal standard by statute is actually very low. It's any credible evidence, and you're not subject to the rules of evidence that would apply in a domestic violence injunction case or in a civil case. It's any credible evidence. So essentially, we can submit anything that you believe would, establish that the person is abusing you. Obviously, there's best evidence, right, which is the stuff we just discussed. But if you have other stuff, witnesses, and et cetera, we can use that as well.
Yep. Okay. And how does getting a restraining order or a police report help in an immigration case? It kind of goes with what you're saying, but if you could just speak to that one more time.
I mean, it's critical. If you get a restraining order and the police, it's as you mentioned, Conti, it's something other than you claiming something happened, right? I mean, if you report the incident to a police officer, that is going to be critical evidence that the police officer came to the scene, observed you, saw, bruise marks on your skin or whatever. And if he arrests the abuser, this is going to be huge evidence, immensely important, because it's going to establish that a person observed both parties and determined who was the abuser and who was the person committing the crime. Usually, it had to, and the officer that comes on the scene is going to have to make a decision. Does he arrest you, or does I think in Orlando there's sort of a rule, right, that if the officer shows up in the scheme at your house and somebody says that there was physical violence, somebody's going is taking a ride, somebody's going with the police. And so if the officer believes that the abuser clearly was the instigator and started the physical conflict, then that is going to be tremendously helpful to establish your case. If you get a restraining order, the same thing. If you have an order from a judge that the judge believed you that the abuser, was harming you physically, emotionally, whatever, that's going to be immensely helpful to your immigration case and probably be one of those guaranteed wins on a VAWA case. The challenge is always when you don't have those reports or when you don't have the restraining order. So if you're in the middle of that type of situation, I would say, and you live in a safe county, crazy to say that, but there are counties that are safer, where law enforcement as an immigrant will come and help. If you live in a safe county, I would seriously make sure that you call the police, request a restraining order, document the abuse.
Absolutely. One question that I'm getting a lot that I want to answer is that, if I leave my husband because of abuse, but he's saying I kidnapped our kids, how do I protect myself legally? And typically, law enforcement should not get involved in that type of case because it's a civil matter. They should say you need to go to the courts, and they typically don't get involved in those issues. If there is no court case pending, whether it's a paternity case or a dissolution of marriage case, you can relocate with your children. You need to contact us first because it's a very tricky situation. We'll make sure that we're giving you the right advice. But if there's nothing pending, you can move around or relocate. If someone accuses you of kidnapping your kid, law enforcement typically will not get involved with that and say that it's a civil matter.
Yeah, how do you kidnap your own kids?
Right. So, but if if there's a case pending and then you relocate after a case has been filed, then they can do emergency pickup order and have you return the child, because you can't relocate more than 50 miles without an order from the court or the consent of the parent. So that's where it kind of gets tricky on when did you relocate? When was it filed? The court case. When did you get notice of it? So those things play a role, but you need to contact us if you have a question about that. But typically law enforcement should not get involved. It should be a civil matter if the other parent is accusing you of kidnapping your child.
Right.
Okay. And then one more question. Can I file for custody or time sharing if I'm staying at a domestic violence shelter? Yes, you can. They may bring up that you don't have proper housing or whatever else. We can address that and explain why you're there, but you can absolutely file for time sharing if you are at a shelter. Contact us so that we can help you prepare the arguments and kind of help you figure out the steps and the strategy if you're in that situation.
I presume, Conti, that it makes a difference if you contact you before the situation arises, so you can kind of strategize, organize. I would say in the immigration context, that's the same thing, right? The earlier we know and the earlier we're involved, the better it is. And I've seen you guys in action. I've seen you guys do amazing things with family law matters. So I strongly encourage people to contact Conti more the boss of family law in Central Florida.
And as I tell people to contact Frank, because Frank is awesome. So if you have a family law issue, please give us a call. The number's on the screen, 407-831-0203, and we will give you a initial free consultation if you have any questions. And Frank he's all over the news, very well respected, board certified immigration attorney, and I encourage people to contact you because everyone I send to you, you take good care of them and you help them and you're honest about what you can and cannot do.
Thank you, Conti. Yeah, I appreciate that. The feeling is mutual. We love working with you. And I think that's one of the biggest things for people is to understand if you have a family related issue and you have an immigration matter, it's critical that you have great, legal counsel. And we love working with Conti because it just helps to give assurances to the family and ourselves that we have somebody on the other hand that is looking for the person's interest from a family law perspective. I don't know much about family law. I nothing about family law. I stay out of it. I refer to, and one of the things is there's a lot of people out there that seem to think you can be jack of all trades and master of all. That is very difficult to be really good at everything. So the best you can do for yourself is contact two separate experts in their respective field. Conti's the best in family law. And so I strongly encourage all my clients to work with you because it just makes things a lot easier for them.
The feeling's mutual. So thank you so much, Frank, for joining us. I hope that everyone learned something. I did. Again, we want to be a resource to our communities, and we want to make sure that people have information that's accurate and up to date based off our current laws. So thank you so much, Frank. And we hope that you enjoyed it, and we'll see you guys next month.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.